You probably think you know what a tattoo is: self-expression, rebellion, art worn on the skin, a choice about how the world sees you. That is what a tattoo means today. But the oldest tattoos ever found on a human body meant something else entirely. They were not meant to be seen. They were not pictures. They were not beautiful. They were small, simple, hidden, lines and crosses, tucked over joints and along a spine, and every one of them was placed exactly where it hurt. The first human we know of who wore ink was in pain. He died on a glacier 5,300 years ago, and his frozen body still carries 61 of them. To understand why ancient humans marked their skin, you have to forget almost everything tattoos mean to you now. Because the story does not begin with art. It begins with a body trying to survive itself. The man in the ice has a name now. We call him Ötzi, named for the Ötztal Alps, where he was found, on the border between Austria and Italy. He is the oldest natural human mummy in Europe, and he is, without question, one of the most studied bodies in the world. We know exactly what he ate before the end: red deer, herb bread, coarse ground grain. We know how he died: an arrowhead buried in his shoulder, a blow to the head. We know he was around 45 years old. We know he was going bald. We know he was sick, worn down joints, hardened arteries, and a gut crawling with parasites. But the thing that should stop you cold is the ink. 61 tattoos, grouped into 19 separate clusters scattered across his body, and for a long time, most of them were invisible. 5,000 years in the ice had darkened his skin almost to black. The marks hid inside that darkness. It took modern eyes to find them all. In 2015, a researcher named Marco Samadelli changed everything. He photographed every inch of the body using multispectral imaging, light beyond what the human eye can see, from infrared to ultraviolet. Under that light, the hidden tattoos appeared, faint marks no one had ever noticed, slowly rising up out of the skin. That was when the count reached 61, the last one found on his ribcage, almost 25 years after the body was discovered. Now look at what the tattoos actually were. Because this is where the assumption you walked in with begins to break. They were not animals. They were not the symbol of a god. They were not a name, not a face, not a story you could read. They were lines, simple parallel lines, and a few small crosses, grouped in tight bundles, stacked together like rows of tally marks. Nothing that looks like art to your modern eye at all, and the way they were made was just as plain. Someone cuts fine incisions into the skin, then rubs charcoal, soot, ash, down into the open cuts, and when the wounds heal, the dark pigment stays, locked beneath the skin for good. No needle, no machine, just a sharpened blade, a fire's cold leftovers, and a steady, careful hand. A newer study suggests the marks may have been punctured in with a single fine point. Either way, the method was simple, ancient, and deliberate. So we have a man, 5,000 years dead, his body covered in plain dark lines, made on purpose, and every single one of them had to be endured. And it leaves you with the question that has haunted researchers for decades. Why? The first clue is in the placement. The tattoos are not scattered at random across his body. They cluster in very specific spots: the lower back, the knees, the ankles, the wrist. And here is the detail that should change how you see all of it. Those are exactly the places where Ötzi's body was quietly breaking down. X-rays and scans of the mummy tell their own story. His joints were worn. His lower spine showed degeneration. His ankles and knees carried the wear of a hard life spent on steep, punishing ground. He was, by the standards of any age, in chronic pain, and the ink sits directly on top of that pain. Mark after mark after mark, placed directly over the parts of him that hurt. That is not how you decorate a body. That is how you treat one. So a theory took shape. What if the tattoos were not art at all? What if they were medicine? A way to mark, and perhaps to ease, the precise points of his pain. And then researchers noticed something stranger still. Many of the tattooed points line up with something familiar. Acupuncture points. The very same pressure points still used today in traditional Chinese medicine. Sit with that for a moment. Otzi died around 3300 BC. The first written record of acupuncture in China comes roughly 2,000 years later. And yet the marks on this frozen European body fall on many of those exact same lines. It suggests something you may find almost impossible to believe, that a form of point-based pain treatment existed in the Alps, 2,000 years before history says it was invented anywhere, not handed down from one culture to another, but arrived at separately by people who simply paid attention to what helped. Now, a careful word here. Not every scientist agrees the tattoos were purely medical. The debate is genuinely open. Some argue the marks were symbolic or spiritual, or somehow both at once. A way of marking pain and giving it meaning. And those things are not opposites. A treatment can also be a ritual. A healing mark can also be a sign of who you are. But the pattern is hard to ignore. The ink follows the injury. The marks land where the body fails. Whatever else they may have meant, they were not placed at random. And Otzi was not the only one. To see how deep this goes, you have to leave the Alps. Because tattooing did not begin and end with one frozen man. It appears again and again across the ancient world, far apart in distance, in cultures that never once met. So travel with me to South America. There, among the Chinchorro people of the coast, lies another tattooed body. An ancient mummy carrying a faint mark above the lip. A thin, faint line above the mouth, like a drawn-on mustache. For years, some believed it was the oldest tattoo of all, until Otzi edged it out. But notice the difference. The Chinchorro mark was on the face, meant to be seen. That is not medicine. That is decoration, identity, a face deliberately shown to the world. Now travel east with me, to the frozen steppes of Siberia. There, in burial mounds, lie the Pazyryk people, and among them, a woman history calls the Ice Maiden, the Princess of Ukok. She died roughly 2,400 years ago, high on the open steppe, and her preserved skin carries tattoos unlike anything on Otzi, not lines, not crosses, beautiful, flowing creatures, deer, mythical beasts, curling, antlered creatures winding all the way up her arm. These were not hidden over a sore joint. They were displayed, intricate, powerful, marks of status, of identity, of belonging to something larger than herself. And then, Egypt. Around the same time, Otzi was being marked in the Alps. People along the Nile were being tattooed too. On mummies thousands of years old, researchers found figures inked into the skin. Animals, a great wild bull, a horned sheep, some of the oldest figurative tattoos ever discovered. So look at what you actually have now. In the Alps, plain lines over pain, healing. In South America, a mark on the face, identity. In Siberia, animals of power up the arm, status. In Egypt, living figures pressed into the skin, meaning made visible. Different continents, different thousands of years, different reasons, and yet the same ACT, cutting open the skin and making the mark permanent for life. When a behavior appears everywhere, humans appear. It is rarely an accident. It is something far deeper than fashion or fleeting style. So step back with me from the marks themselves and ask the real question. Not, what does this tattoo mean? But why did humans, everywhere, reach for this at all? Why cut the skin on purpose? Why choose permanent pain just to leave behind a permanent mark? Start with the simplest answer, the body. For most of human history, your skin was the only thing you truly carried. No documents, no photographs, no records. The body itself was the only page you ever truly owned, and a tattoo was a way to write on it, forever. To mark what you survived, to mark who you belonged to mark where the pain lived, and try somehow to push it back. A tattoo is the one possession that can never be lost or stolen. It goes into the grave with you, just as Otzi's marks went with him into the ice. Then there is the pain itself. If you have ever been tattooed, you know it hurts. It always has. And that is not a flaw in the practice. It may be the point. Pain is what makes a mark mean something real. Anyone can wear a necklace. Anyone can paint their face for a day. But to carry a tattoo, you have to bleed for it and keep it for life. That permanence is a kind of proof. Proof of endurance, of loyalty, of having passed through something and survived. In culture after culture, tattoos marked exactly those moments. Becoming an adult, surviving an ordeal, joining a group, mourning a loss. The mark said, "This happened to me, and now I carry it with me." And for Otzi, perhaps, the mark said something quieter. "This is where it hurts. This is where I am trying, somehow, to be well again." There is one more layer the science is only beginning to map. Tattooing, almost everywhere, was not done alone. Someone else held the blade. Someone else rubbed in the ash. Someone else sat with you through the pain. The marking of the skin was a shared act between two people, a bond between the one who marked and the one who was marked. Think of who might have given Otzi his 61 lines. A healer, an elder, someone trusted enough to cut your skin and try to help. That is not just treatment. That is care. The oldest tattoos on Earth may also be among the oldest evidence of one human being trying to ease another human being's suffering. And that brings us back to you. Back to your own skin, and what you think a tattoo is. We tend to believe we invented the modern tattoo, the meaning, the self-expression, the art. But every impulse behind it is ancient. The need to mark a body that words could not hold, the need to make pain visible to others, or to make survival permanent, the need to carry your people, your loss, your story, on the only surface that is always yours. When you choose ink today, you are not doing something new. You are doing something 5,300 years old, something a dying man in the Alps once did, for reasons we are still piecing together. The tools changed, the needle replaced the blade, the colors multiplied, the reasons grew louder, prouder, and far more personal. But the act is the same. Break the skin, leave the mark, carry it to the grave. Otzi did not choose his tattoos to be remembered. He almost certainly never imagined being seen again at all. He was a man in pain, on a mountain, far from home, trying to feel better. And 5,000 years later, those small marks are the loudest thing he left behind. Not his weapons, not his clothes, not his name, which we will never know. 61 small lines, placed where it hurt. They have outlasted empires, languages, whole civilizations risen and gone, and they still carry a message, even if it was never meant for us. The message is simple. Humans have always marked their bodies, to heal, to belong, to remember, to endure. Long before art, long before vanity, long before history thought to write any of it down. The next time you see ink on someone's skin or feel the weight of the choice on your own, remember the man in the ice. Remember that the first tattoos were not for show. They were for survival, for meaning, for the deep human need to take what hurts and make it mean something. That need did not begin with us. It began with people whose names are gone, whose faces are dust, whose only surviving words are written in soot and scars just beneath the surface of the skin. Otzi has been dead for 53 centuries. But the questions in his tattoos are still ours. What do we carry? What do we want to keep? What pain do we choose to mark, so that we never forget it was there? We have machines now, and ink in every color, and 1,000 reasons. He had a blade, a handful of ash, and a body that ached. And still, across all that time, we are doing the same thing. Writing on ourselves, making the temporary permanent. Turning the living body into a record that nothing can ever erase. The oldest tattoos in the world were never really about decoration. They were about being human, about leaving a mark on the one surface you can never put down. The skin remembers what the world forgets, and it has been remembering for 5,300 years.